The kunai is the classic weapon of a shinobi in the Naruto world. Ninjas learn how to use them ever since they're 5 years old and are in the academy. That's literally one of the first things they know, how to deal with those weapons and how to fight with them. Most of the Naruto characters use kunais one time or another during the entire series, and kunais were present up until the very end of the Naruto series, even when the characters were extremely powerful, and you could even argue that kunais are not even gonna be that effective anymore because, yeah, they're just kunais. What's a kunai gonna do against a perfect Susanoo, for example? But the ninjas still use them. And yet, the kunais have never been very useful in the first place. As a matter of fact, you could make a very good case that nobody was ever killed or gravely injured by a kunai, at least a named character in the series. And yet, everyone still uses the kunais, even though their effectiveness is obviously not very good. Why is that? To answer that question, we're gonna have to go over moments when characters used kunais during the Naruto series, and also some moments when kunais were useful, but they are kinda rare. It is established very early on, the Land of Waves arc, that kunais are supposed to be extremely dangerous weapons. When Zabuza is lurking around Team 7 trying to get an opening to kill Tazuna, Naruto notices something wrong in the bushes and throws a kunai at it. Zabuza uses the substitution jutsu and changes places with a rabbit, and Kakashi is kinda surprised at Naruto's movements and a little bit scared. He says, "Hey Naruto, be careful, kunais are very deadly weapons, you should be careful with those, don't do anything stupid." And Kakashi here is kind of implying that Naruto could even hurt himself by using the kunais, and that the kunais are definitely a deadly weapon. So it is established in the series that kunais are powerful weapons, at least when it comes to taijutsu combat. In the Land of Waves arc is also the arc where we see the most effective uses of kunais in the entire series. You may say this is probably because of power creep, but honestly, even in part 1 after the Land of Waves, the first very good usage of a kunai is when Naruto and Sasuke use that combo jutsu to release Kakashi from the water prison. If you remember correctly, the final blow of that combo was Naruto tossing a kunai at Zabuza's arm, forcing him to undo the water prison. Sure, the kunai didn't hit Zabuza, it didn't hurt him one bit because he dodged it, but, well, the combo itself worked and they freed Kakashi, which saved their lives, so the kunai there was extremely useful. In this very same arc, we see a lengthy exchange of kunais when Sasuke fights Haku in the final battle in the bridge. That's before Haku uses the mirrors to trap Naruto and Sasuke in there, when just Sasuke is fighting Haku, and he's using kunais to fight Haku. Granted, Haku is using needles, but we can see in that particular fight that kunais were being used to their utmost extent. There's a very cool moment in the fight where Sasuke just flicks his wrist and throws the kunai from a very short range, forcing Haku to dodge, and that allows him to kick Kabuto in the face because he got an opening. And also, in this arc, Zabuza uses a kunai that Naruto gives to him to deal with Gato once and for all, killing the mafia boss. And yeah, I think Gato is the only person in the entire Naruto series that is named that was ever killed by a kunai. And he wasn't even a ninja, so honestly, Zabuza could have just kicked him and he would have done the same thing, but let's be real, the way Zabuza killed him was pretty cool, so I'm not complaining about that whatsoever. In the Chunin exams, kunais begin to be used more in the way they are just used for the rest of the series. Characters usually pull kunais when they want to seem threatening and when they want to deal with characters sometimes in taijutsu exchanges, or when they want to deflect shurikens coming towards them, but the usage of kunais is extremely arbitrary. If you have any experience whatsoever with martial arts, you know that having a knife in a fist fight, which is essentially a kunai in this case, is an extremely powerful advantage. It exponentially increases your threat level in a fight, and characters in Naruto, they kinda pick and choose moments to pull kunais, and sometimes they simply don't, and they choose to fist fight. Which, in the real life, if you want to really kill your opponent, if you don't care about hurting him, which is most battles in the Naruto series, would make absolutely no sense. Even a highly trained martial artist would have trouble dealing with an untrained, armed man with a knife. It's very difficult for someone with a lot of training to not get hurt when dealing with someone untrained with a knife. So imagine if you are trained and you have a knife and your opponent doesn't. Rock Lee, for instance, he barely uses kunais. I think he used it like one time when he's fighting Gaara, and he used the kunai to slash at the sand? And the same thing also applies to other types of weapons. If you have a sword that's quite a bit longer than a kunai, this is also gonna grant you an absurd advantage in the battlefield if you're fighting against someone with a knife, for instance. That exchange when Sasuke was using his sword and Itachi was using his kunai in Naruto Shippuden, that makes kinda no sense, because honestly, having just a kunai and defending against a sword is ludicrous. You're not gonna be able to do that if you're remotely matched for the fight. And it's even more absurd when Kakashi is fighting against Zabuza, and Zabuza is using the Executioner's Blade against Kakashi's kunai, and Zabuza's blade is taller than him. So yeah, we can wave that off saying, well, this is shonen anime, things are not supposed to be completely realistic, and I definitely get that. Of course, not every character is gonna be pulling kunais every time, because things would be repetitive, even though it would make sense. We also like to see taijutsu combat with no weapons. Rock Lee and Might Guy wouldn't have the same appeal if instead of just fighting with their fists and kicks and all that, pulled kunais every time they had a fight. Also, obviously, their gates wouldn't be as powerful because their weapons would probably break if they are fighting with the gates and the kunais, but still in base, pulling kunais in real life would be the most effective strategy for them. And this uselessness of kunais kind of extends itself to every single type of weapon in Naruto. Shurikens, swords, everything in between. I mean, swords can be kind of useful, especially if you have a sword like Samehada, or if you're Sasuke, he deals a little bit of damage with his sword, but usually that's because he's lacing it with his Raikiri. Asuma also uses kunais to a very effective degree, but that's because he uses his wind style jutsu with them, and I'm mostly talking about the tool itself without any type of chakra imping it. No one really gets killed by kunais, at least people that have names, except for Gato, as I said before. And take Tenten, for instance. She is a weapons specialist. Her jutsu is literally to summon weapons, such as kunais, and spam them non-stop against her opponents. And Tenten is quite literally one of the most useless characters in the Naruto series. The only fight she ever won was against her doppelganger, and Kakuzu, but Kakuzu is so fodder that nobody even cares about that anyway. And as we're talking about Tenten here, of course kunais can also be used as throwing weapons very effectively. I mean, Naruto uses that against Zabuza in the first arc, and that's probably the most effective usage of a kunai ever. Usually, kunais are not used as much to throw things unless the kunai has an explosive tag or a smoke bomb attached to it. Otherwise, ninjas will tend to throw shurikens instead of kunais anyway. But the thing is, kunais, if they hit the opponent, it's always implied that they would hurt. For instance, when Kakashi is fighting against Tendo Pain in the Pain Invasion arc, he tosses a kunai against Tendo with a smoke bomb, and Tendo uses Shinra Tensei to block a single kunai coming at him. Like, first of all, why didn't he just dodge the kunai? Is Kakashi that good at throwing kunais? I mean, I believe he's really good, but you can probably dodge a kunai. Second of all, this implies that if the kunai hit Tendo Pain, even though Tendo Pain is just a corpse being used as a puppet, that implies that it would have been very detrimental for Tendo's ability to fight if he got hit directly by the kunai, so he uses Shinra Tensei, an ability that has a cooldown, and it's not something Tendo Pain would be wanting to spam the entire time because it also takes a lot of chakra to use. And yet, not a single named character gets hit or even killed by a kunai during the series. The odds of that are astronomical. I mean, some characters get hit by weapons, like Sakura was pierced by Sasori's sword very badly, but it wasn't a kunai and she didn't die from it, of course. Jiraiya, granted, he died to weapons. I mean, the Rinnegan rod skewered him till he was killed, but those were not kunais, of course. Obviously, Itachi uses kunais as well. He used them against Kurenai when he invaded the Leaf Village, and Kurenai had to dodge that. Itachi even cut a bit of her hair with a kunai, and he also pierced one of Kakashi's water clones with a kunai, which, well, it dispelled the clone at least, but that's about it. But there were situations where characters should definitely have used kunais in the story, such as when Naruto was fighting Sasuke in the final battle of the series. When they run out of chakra and they're completely depleted, unable to use any sort of jutsu, and it's just a slogfest of them punching each other, why didn't they pull kunais? I mean, Sasuke has to summon his weapons. He summons a couple of shurikens in that part of the battle anyway. Why wouldn't he just summon a kunai to fight hand-to-hand against Naruto? Why wouldn't Naruto use kunais as well? I mean, you could even say that Naruto wasn't trying to kill Sasuke, and that is true, so he wouldn't go for stabbing blows against Sasuke's heart or neck, but Sasuke was trying to kill Naruto, and he could summon weapons. He still had a little bit of chakra left in the fight when he summoned kunais and used a Chidori against Naruto. And we also see that they hit each other dozens, if not hundreds of times during the part of the battle when they're tired. So, let's say if instead of punching Naruto in the face, Sasuke had hit him with a kunai in the forehead, that would have done the job, wouldn't it? And you could say, no, Naruto is way too durable to get killed by a kunai, but weapons seem to ignore durability completely in Naruto. Let's be real here. Every time a sharp weapon hits any character, it cuts the character, it pierces through the character, no matter how durable the character is supposed to be. Unless the character literally has some type of armor around him, the weapon is going to cut him. I mean, Minato's kunai literally cut through an entire tail beast's tail by him casually swinging it, and you could say Minato is so strong and so fast that of course his lashes would pierce through the entire tail's tail, but it's still a kunai made out of metal, and a tail beast should be very strong and durable, so how come the kunai can slash through the entire thing and it doesn't kill anyone? Now, granted, Minato does kill a lot of people with his kunai, but it's mostly off-screen, and Minato mostly uses his kunais for teleportation techniques, which is a very useful technique, don't get me wrong. Of course, Minato's kunai is a very important part of his arsenal, and I'm not saying those kunais are useless, but they are useful because they have the jutsu imbued in them. It's kind of like Asuma's kunais being imbued with wind style. I'm talking about the weapon itself and their capabilities to cause damage in the Naruto series. And this damage we see when people get hit by weapons, they get hurt. Even Jubidara, for example, when he runs through Sasuke's sword because Sasuke used a Minotaji to switch places with the sword literally skewers Madara. And it wasn't even anyone thrusting the sword against Madara, he just ran into the sword. The same thing happens when Madara grabs Sasuke's sword and pierces him with a sword and skewers Sasuke. Sasuke couldn't resist the sword at all, and you could say, yeah man, it's just Sasuke, he's technically a normal person, he doesn't have a stone skin or anything like that, like Kakashi for example, or the Raikages, so the sword would pierce him. But then, these characters are withstanding blows that can nuke entire countries essentially, and they're not dying to them, and a simple sword thrust can kill them, which is kind of the shonen logic here. It's not gonna be very consistent because it's a shonen anime. It's kind of like how characters always survived getting burned alive by fire and fireballs and all that, even though in real life they would be toasted quite literally by them. And yet no character ever gets hurt or killed by a sword except for Gato. And now that we've talked about the kunais and how they are useful and not useful in the series, let's get to why they never kill a single character except for Gato. It's simply because seeing characters dying to kunais, which is something the audience would think is kind of a trivial thing, wouldn't be very satisfying. Now, if background characters get killed by kunais, that's fine because we even expect kunais to kill characters in the series. And we don't even care about those characters anyway, so if they don't have a very remarkable death, it's fine. They're background characters. But let's say if someone big like Jiraiya or an Akatsuki member had died to a kunai, die. Well, that wouldn't have sat well with the audience. Everyone would think their deaths were underwhelming because they died to such a rudimentary tool that anyone uses in the verse, and it's such a common thing. We would even think that those characters were weak because they died to a kunai. Even though the fight itself may have been well thought out, people wouldn't really say that this was a very good death. It's kinda like what happened when Neji got killed by a stick. Everyone says that Neji was like, "Boo, what were you doing here, man? You got blitzed by a stick, and you got killed by a stick. That's not a very good thing." It would be the same thing for a kunai. But let's not even talk about deaths here. Kunais don't even hurt anyone in the Naruto series, and that's mostly because characters tend not to use kunais anyway most of the time, so there's not even a chance for them to get hurt by kunais. Every time a character pulls a kunai, it's mostly to just have this very menacing stance, putting the kunai in front of your body and say, "I'm ready to fight you, but this kunai here, it's just something to show off really, because I am not gonna pierce you with it." And like everything else in life, what you want to reach with those things is balance. Of course, killing characters left and right with kunais wouldn't be very satisfying. Nobody would have liked that. But from time to time, having kunais being useful weapons in the battlefield, dealing damage, maybe even killing someone that has a name in the story, that would have been an interesting thing, because kunais are so widely spread. Why would ninjas even use them if they don't do their job? Now, of course, they do their job, it's just that the main characters cannot be killed or harmed by them, simply because of the story. And because there are much cooler techniques and jutsus that can be used instead of the kunais that would make for better pages in the manga and for better animation and all that. Now, the best animation of a kunai fight is probably Kakashi versus Obito. In the manga, that's very short, but they really push themselves in the anime to make that exchange really cool. But in the end of the day, the kunais, they don't amount to much. Oh, I remember another very useful kunai thing. When Shikamaru used the kunai to make a makeshift parachute in his fight against Temari with his vest and create more shadows so that his shadow possession could reach Temari. That was a pretty cool usage of a kunai, but not damage related. So we can see that the kunais, they are much more of a support tool that's not really supposed to do any damage for the main characters whenever they pull off a strategy like that. Shikamaru really liked to use his kunais. Even against Tayuya, when he pulled off that strategy where he dominated Tayuya's summons, and then Tayuya unsummoned them, but then Shikamaru managed to get close to her. Shikamaru was using kunais there. They weren't effective in the end because Shikamaru had to be saved by Temari, but at least it was a usage for the kunais. Like, I'm not saying kunais weren't used in the series, it's just very strange that they don't seem to do their job very well. Their primary function is kinda lacking, which is, you know, cutting and piercing people. Subscribe to this channel if you haven't done so already, like this video to help me out with the YouTube algorithm, and watch this other video as well if you want more entertaining Naruto content. Thank you so much for watching.